I'm 73 years old, and my car has been sitting in the driveway for 3 weeks without moving. The battery is probably dead by now. The inspection is overdue, but I can't make myself get in and drive it. Not because I don't have anywhere to go. I have a doctor's appointment I've rescheduled twice, groceries I need, a prescription waiting at the pharmacy. But every time I think about getting behind the wheel, my chest tightens and my hands start to shake, and I find a reason not to. And yesterday, standing at my window looking at that car sitting there, I had this terrible moment of clarity. I've stopped driving, not officially, not by choice, but effectively. And without a car, living alone at 73 has quietly become something else entirely. It started maybe 6 months ago with me avoiding certain situations. I wouldn't drive after dark anymore. The headlights from oncoming traffic bothered me. The glare. The way everything looked different at night. So I'd make sure any errands were done before sunset. That seemed reasonable. Safe, even. Just being smart about my limitations. Then I started avoiding highways. The speed felt too fast. The other cars too close. The merging and lane changes too complicated to track all at once. My reflexes weren't what they used to be, and I knew it. So I'd take back roads instead. Surface streets, longer routes that felt safer. And that made sense, too. Why stress myself when there were alternatives? But then I started avoiding busy intersections. Too much to watch. Too many directions to check. Too many decisions to make in too little time. I'd take circuitous routes to avoid left turns across traffic. Would drive miles out of my way to find easier, quieter roads. And my world started shrinking without me quite realizing it. I live alone. I've lived alone for 8 years since my husband died. And living alone after 70 in a place with no public transportation means your car is your lifeline. It's how you get food, how you get to doctor appointments, how you stay connected to the world beyond your house. When you stop driving, even gradually, even with good reasons, you're cutting yourself off from everything that keeps you independent. Have you felt this happening? This slow retreat from driving? One avoided situation at a time? The real problem started when I began cancelling plans rather than driving to them. A lunch with old friends across town? Too far? Too much traffic? I'd cancel at the last minute with some excuse. A church event that started at 7. Too late? Getting dark. I'd stay home instead. Slowly, over months, I stopped going places not because I didn't want to, but because getting there required driving, and driving had become something that filled me with dread. When was the last time you drove somewhere without anxiety? Without planning the route obsessively to avoid everything that scares you? The grocery store became my biggest challenge because I couldn't avoid it forever. I'd put it off as long as possible, eating whatever I had in the house, making do with less and less, until I absolutely had to go. And then I'd spend the whole drive there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, heart racing, checking mirrors constantly, terrified of making a mistake, and the drive home with groceries in the car, worried about other drivers, about my reaction time, about all the things that could go wrong. I started having groceries delivered instead. It cost more, but the relief of not having to drive was worth it. And I told myself this was smart, convenient, modern, but really it was surrender. Another piece of independence I was giving up because I couldn't face the alternative. My daughter started to notice. She'd call and ask what I'd been doing, and I'd realize I hadn't left the house in days. She'd suggest we meet somewhere, and I'd always insist she'd come to me instead. She'd ask why, and I'd make excuses. Too tired. not feeling well, house needs cleaning, anything but the truth, which was that I was terrified of driving. Do you make up reasons to stay home because admitting you're afraid to drive feels like admitting too much? 3 months ago, I had a close call. Not an accident, but close. I was at a four-way stop and thought it was my turn and started to go, and another car was already moving, and I had to brake hard, and we both stopped and no contact was made, but my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might be having a heart attack. I sat there at that intersection, cars behind me honking, completely frozen, unable to move, barely able to breathe. I made it home somehow. Pulled into my driveway, shaking so badly I could barely get the key out of the ignition. And I sat in my car, in my own driveway, and cried. Not because of what had happened, but because of what it meant. That I wasn't safe. That my judgment was off. That my reactions were too slow. That elderly living alone, for me, had become elderly living dangerously every time I got behind a wheel. After that, I started driving even less. Only when absolutely necessary. Only short trips. Only routes I knew by heart. And even then, only on days when I felt sharp and clear and capable, which were fewer and fewer. The car sat more than it moved. Days would pass, then a week, then 2 weeks. And each time I thought about driving, I'd remember that moment at the four-way stop, and my chest would tighten, and I'd find a reason to put it off. My son came to visit, and noticed my inspection sticker was expired. He asked when I'd last driven the car, and I couldn't remember. He asked if everything was okay, and I finally told him. About the fear, about the close call, about how I'd basically stopped driving without making an actual decision to stop. And I could see the worry on his face. The calculation happening behind his eyes. If his mother couldn't drive, what did that mean for her ability to live alone? And that's the fear, isn't it? That nursing home fear that lives in the back of every older person's mind. Because if you can't drive, you can't get to appointments, or buy groceries, or handle emergencies. You become dependent on others for everything. And once you're that dependent, how long before someone decides you can't manage alone? How long before the conversation shifts from whether you should stop driving to whether you should still be living in your own home? We had a long conversation that day about whether I was actually unsafe or just anxious. About whether I needed my eyes checked or my medications adjusted or just practice to rebuild confidence. About whether there were alternatives to completely giving up driving. And underneath all of it, the unspoken question, was I still capable of living independently? He took me to have my vision checked. My eyes were fine. Not perfect, but fine, for driving, with glasses. We talked to my doctor about the anxiety. She asked about other things I was avoiding, and I had to admit driving wasn't the only area where fear was taking over. She suggested some options. Therapy. Maybe medication for anxiety. Adult driving courses designed for older adults to rebuild confidence and assess actual capability. But she also said something that stung. She said that if I was truly unsafe, then stopping driving was the right thing to do. But I needed to face what that meant for my living situation. That living alone after 70 without the ability to drive, in a place with no public transit, wasn't sustainable. That I'd need to make changes, get help, maybe move somewhere more accessible, maybe not live alone at all. We compromised on a plan. My son took me to a driving assessment program. They evaluated my actual abilities, not just my fears. And it turned out I was more capable than I thought. My vision was adequate. My reflexes were slower but acceptable. My judgment was sound. What I needed wasn't to stop driving, but to address the anxiety that was making driving feel impossible. I started small. My son rode with me on short trips, just to the end of the street, then to the corner store, gradually building back confidence. We practiced the situations I'd been avoiding: busy intersections, left turns, highway merging, all with him there to guide me, to reassure me, to prove to me that I could still do this. It's been 6 weeks now. I'm driving again, not as much as I used to, not long trips or at night or in heavy traffic, but enough. Enough to get groceries, enough to get to appointments, enough to maintain some independence. And I'm working on the anxiety with a therapist, learning that aging and independence don't mean pretending everything is fine when it isn't. They mean honestly assessing what you can do, getting help with what you can't, and building support around your limitations. But I also know that someday, maybe soon, I will need to stop driving permanently, that this is probably temporary, that my body and my mind will continue to change, and there will come a point when driving really isn't safe. And when that time comes, I'll need to have a plan, a way to maintain independence without a car, or accept that I need to live somewhere different, somewhere with better access to services, somewhere where I'm not isolated without wheels. If you've started avoiding driving, if your car sits unused for days or weeks, if fear keeps you home when you need to go out, please hear what I'm saying. This is serious. This is about more than transportation. This is about whether you can maintain your independence, whether you can meet your basic needs, whether living alone is still viable. There's still time to assess whether you're truly unsafe or just anxious. There's still time to get help, rebuild skills, make adaptations that let you keep driving safely. But there's also time to face reality if driving really isn't safe anymore, to make plans for how to maintain independence without it, to build support systems before you're completely isolated. So please, be honest with yourself. Why have you stopped driving? Is it real inability or fear? And if you truly can't drive safely, what's your plan? Because hoping someone will always be available to take you places isn't a plan. That's just waiting for crises. If this resonated with you, if you're struggling with this same fear, I hope you'll subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who might be avoiding their car. Leave a comment telling me your experience, because you're not alone. Hit the like button if this felt real. We need to talk about driving honestly. We need to face our limitations while we can still plan around them. That's something I'm learning one careful trip at a time.